Even Junji Ito has limits. He's scrapped entire story ideas for being too brutal or crude. That's right. The master of spirals, living balloons, and body horror still knows when something's just too disturbing. Junji Ito's long dream was inspired by a creepy theory about sleep. His sister once told him that dreams happen in an instant, even if they feel like hours. That idea stuck with him, and he turned it into a horror story about a man whose dreams keep getting longer, until they take over his entire life. Junji Ito says he's always thought of his manga like films. He loves movies, and even frames his stories with cinematic pacing and composition. That's why he's thrilled when his works get adapted for the screen. In my manga, I try to portray it like a movie, he says. Seeing them come to life makes me happy. Junji Ito says he isn't scared of the grotesque. He's fascinated by it. He admits he's more curious than afraid, even joking. Maybe I just have bad taste. Ito's horror doesn't come from disgust, but curiosity, especially about the human body and the emotions it hides. To him, true horror lives inside people, not outside them. Junji Ito says his core theme isn't just horror, it's disintegration. Like Edo-era artist Utagawa Kuniyoshi, he's fascinated by the human body breaking apart, smashed, melted, and decayed. For Ito, horror isn't only about fear. It's about watching things fall apart, the body, the mind, even reality itself. That's the true spectacle of disintegration. Junji Ito insisted used record be animated. He wanted to hear Paula Bell's scat come to life on screen. Junji Ito admits his greatest fear isn't ghosts or monsters, it's himself. He says he hates seeing his own face or hearing his voice in interviews, calling it deeply uncomfortable. That fear of self, of being seen or confronting your own reflection, inspired his obsession with doppelgangers and doubles. I hate seeing objectively what I look like, he says. It's no wonder so many of his stories turn the mirror into a source of horror. Junji Ito believes horror is like a form of self-cleansing. He says he's a gentle person in real life because he pours all his dark thoughts into his manga. I had something sordid in my mind, but I've released it through drawing. Now I'm clean. By turning his inner darkness into art, Ito transforms fear and ugliness into something beautiful. Junji Ito admits he has almost no fashion sense. He says he dresses simply, choosing clothes that don't draw attention. And when it comes to fashion lines using his characters, he leaves it all to the designers. Junji Ito says our love for horror comes from instinct. We're drawn to what scares us because deep down, we want to understand it, to protect ourselves. Horror gives us a safe way to face fear, which makes it strangely fun. Ito compares it to forbidden fruit, terrifying but impossible to resist. Junji Ito has one golden rule for writing horror: end at the climax. He says a good horror story should feel like an escalator that only goes up. No pauses, no relief, just rising tension until it ends at the moment of pure terror. Then, it's over, leaving you hanging in fear long after the last page. Junji Ito says his horror doesn't come from real experiences, but pure imagination. He starts with what-if ideas and lets his mind build strange, unsettling worlds. I may not believe in ghosts anymore, he says, but I still love them. So I just expand on ideas I find interesting. That's why his stories feel like surreal nightmares instead of simple ghost tales. Junji Ito takes his time with every story, on purpose. He wants his work to feel timeless, not tied to any trend or era. Ito says he often throws out and reworks ideas just to keep things fresh. For him, longevity in horror comes from patience and creativity, not speed. Junji Ito, the master of horror, has a surprising dream. He wants to create a romantic comedy. He said he'd love to try a lighthearted youth or romance story, but admits it might be impossible for him. Even when he thinks about love, horror somehow finds its way back in. Junji Ito once revealed that the hanging balloons, came straight from a nightmare he had as a child. He believes childhood fears never truly fade. Those early impressions stay with you for the rest of your life. Ito says H.P. Lovecraft shaped his entire approach to fear. The slow reveal of the unknown, the dread of something too vast to understand. You can feel it in stories like Hellstar Remina and The Thing That Drifted Ashore. Junji Ito doesn't start his stories with a plot. He starts with an image. If he can picture a single striking visual, like a terrifying climax, the story grows from there. Most of the time, I don't have a story. I start with an image or intuition, he says. That's why his manga feels like vivid nightmares, born from one haunting vision that spirals out of control. Junji Ito figured sharks aren't scary if you never enter the ocean, so he gave them legs. Junji Ito believes horror today isn't necessarily scarier, just more graphic. He says the core of fear hasn't changed. People still fear the same things. What's different now is how creators chase shock value. Ito compared it to when The Exorcist once terrified audiences. Now horror pushes things far more extreme. Junji Ito says spirals are terrifying because they pull things inward, like a whirlpool with no end. To him, the deeper you go, the more endless it feels. That infinite descent is what makes spirals truly horrifying. When Junji Ito was asked to create a new series for a bigger audience, he wanted to challenge himself. He chose something simple and universal, the spiral. Ito said spirals were usually seen in gag manga as silly doodles, so he decided to twist that playful image into something terrifying. I thought I could make the spiral design more complex and give it a creepy feeling. Uzumaki was Junji Ito's big break in the West. When it was translated into English in the late 90s, Japanese horror was exploding with movies like Ringu and Pulse. Before official releases existed, fans were already sharing Ito's work through online scanlations, spreading his stories across the early internet and turning him into a global cult legend. In 1990, one Tomie volume sold so poorly that Junji Ito kept visiting a Nagoya bookstore just to stare at the unsold copies. I couldn't help but visit again and again, he said. He even titled his next draft, Final, planning to end the series for good. But instead, that failure pushed him to create new short horror stories, and it reignited his entire career. When Tomie ran in a girls' horror magazine, Junji Ito got letters from young women saying they aspired to be like her. Not because of the horror, but because Tomie is confident, beautiful, and lives by her own rules. Ito was surprised at first, but he realized Tomie had become a symbol of freedom and independence for many female readers. When Junji Ito was a teenager, he was terrified of talking to girls, so he turned that fear into art by creating Tomie, a stunning, immortal woman who manipulates and destroys anyone drawn to her. Ito says making Tomie helped him face his fear, and in the process, he created one of horror's most iconic characters. Fans always thought Junji Ito named Tomie after some dark myth or hidden symbol, but the truth is much simpler and kind of charming. Ito revealed her name actually came from an old Japanese song called Otomi-san by Kasuga Hachiro. So one of horror's most haunting icons was inspired by a tune, not a legend. To create Tomie, Junji Ito flipped through glossy fashion magazines, studying perfect anonymous models. He wanted her beauty to feel unreal, distant, almost inhuman. Ito said, "I wanted Tomie to have a mysterious, anonymous attraction. She's beauty without identity, hauntingly hollow, and that's what makes her terrifying." Junji Ito's big break came from a girls' magazine called Monthly Halloween, a publication for readers who were, quote, tired of happiness. His debut story, Tomie, was aimed at teen girls, even though it was filled with grotesque horror and violence, a dark rebellion against Japan's cute, kawaii culture of the time. Despite being a master of horror, Junji Ito admits something chilling. "I'm afraid of dying." That same fear, the terror of disappearing forever, is what inspired Tomie, the girl who never dies. His fear of death became her curse of immortality. Junji Ito says Tomie is all about narcissism taken to the extreme. A lot of his horror comes from self-obsession, dependence, and anxiety. Emotions, he believes, are at the root of fear itself. Even animals, he says, act out of a need to calm their anxiety, making fear and unease a universal instinct. Did you know Junji Ito's Tomie was inspired by real tragedy? Back in junior high, a classmate of Ito's died in a car accident. He couldn't shake the eerie thought, how someone full of life could just disappear. That haunting idea? It became Tomie, the girl who refuses to stay dead no matter how many times she's killed. Honored ancestors originally included a doctor performing surgeries to extend the family chain, and the son would either be severed by a slamming door or torn apart by a car while chasing Risa outside. Junji Ito reveals that in Shiver, the doctor was originally intended to be invisible to anyone not affected by the Jade Curse, and the protagonist was envisioned as being more aggressive. Junji Ito reveals that in Hanging Blimp, the body-hanging balloons were initially meant to be a surreal opener, foreshadowing an event. He later made them the focus, imagining the bodies as animate and violent despite being dead. Their true nature was to be revealed only after a crash, with aggression limited to nighttime. Early designs also included multi-stringed balloons resembling hot air balloons. Junji Ito stated that the long dream originally delved deeper into philosophy on souls, death, and medical ethics. The patient would take his own life, revealing crystals during an autopsy. The doctor would then use the crystals to experience long dreams and recommend the substance to a new patient. Elements condensed in the final story but expanded in the film adaptation. When creating Fashion Model, Ito considered giving Fuchi shark-like traits, but dropped the idea after a widely publicized shark attack. Junji Ito revealed that in Fashion Model, Fuchi was meant to be more eloquent. Her strange manager would appear, and she would be killed by the protagonist's car. Greased was originally conceived as a story about an entire town or society plagued by oil, rather than focusing solely on a restaurant, which still appears in Yui's nightmares.